Time for another board recap podcast. How are you today, Dr. Smith?
It's a good day. The day before we may get a little bit of weather, but that temperature is going to stay warm enough to where we're going to be in good shape.
Knock on wood, let's hope you're right. But rest assured, we monitor that situation very closely, as we'll do all evening long to make sure that everything goes smoothly. But I do think you may be right about those temperatures.
We were prepared either way.
Yes, indeed. So we'll start with last night's school board meeting. And first thing we had, like always, was good news. And once again, we had a lot of good things to share last night. In fact, I thought President Kiefer at the end of Good News raised a good point that, so many great things happen in all of our schools each day. And many of our school staff maybe just take them for granted because it's what they do. But we like to shout out some of those special things.
Right. I think it's important to elevate those things. But I loved his point. So many of those good news items or articles are just so commonplace in our schools.
They just happen.
They do just happen.
Yes. But let's look at the ones we shouted out last night.
Sounds good.
At the meeting. So first of all, Coach Ken Wimpy, longtime EVSC employee, teacher, administrator, and then during his post-education career moved into the coaching role. And we certainly talked about him and his girls golf teams frequently because what they accomplished at the state level was second to none. But he was inducted into North High School's Hall of Fame recently.
And you will see on that picture or on those pictures, his lovely wife, Jan, accompanies him to everything. And she, in her own right, was a fantastic teacher.
Yes.
I actually had her as a student at Halfrick Park Elementary School.
Yes. And anytime I've seen you or anybody that she had in class, you can just see that the great memories they had of her as well. So what a dynamic couple working for kids in this community for a long time now. Unified basketball, unified sports, if you're not familiar with that, that's where you have students who have some special needs that are playing whatever the sport is with those students who do not have special needs, and just to see them come together. And recently they had a basketball game. It was during halftime of one of our boys varsity games. And you talk about the kids being into it and the cheering section and the crowds, just a real feel-good moment. And that is really a great program for all of these students.
Certainly agree. And I think you said it well. It was a feel-good moment.
Yes, definitely. Next on Good News, we're starting to do more of a weekly podcast update, just some of the really interesting things going on that viewers, listeners may not be aware of. And recently I had a chance to have a conversation with Jessica Reed, who's the Director of Instructional Core Process and Improvement. And Jessica really talked to me about just everything happening in the world of AP courses. And I know this is something that's a great pride point for you as well at the high school level, because the number of students, you can see on the graphic, we now have 32 AP courses in our high school. We've had 135% increase in students taking these courses since 2019. And when we get a broader representation of students in there, it's a win-win.
It certainly is. We know from a lot of research that just exposure to an AP class raises the persistence of a college-going student by more than 30%.
And kudos to some students because they're taking multiple AP classes.
Absolutely.
And these are not easy courses.
They are not. And just a shout out to Jessica Reed, her title, Director of Instructional Core Process Improvement. So what does that mean? Well, we do embrace continuous improvement. And I will tell you that it's very easy for organizations to get in the habit of doing things that you've always done in the way that you've always done them. But that is never how you improve. So I think hats off to Jessica, because she, I think, is due in large part working with her schools, working with her teachers to get 130+% increase in the number of students that are taking and being successful in her AP classes.
Yeah. And just that collaboration going on, because then our schools too, on top of that, they're doing the steps necessary to make sure those students are successful in those courses. They're not just welcoming into the room and then moving on and how you do is how you do. No, they are making sure supports are in place so that people are going to be successful.
Absolutely. If you want rigorous instruction, we've got it.
You are correct about that, Dr. Smith. We're really always trying to lift up our student athletes, who we have so many of in so many different sports. And we always want to make sure we're showing all of our sports to showcase, not just the football and the basketball teams, but our swimmers. You talk about incredible athletes. These students are amazing, both swimming and diving. We recently had the city swim meet. We posted a lot of pictures, and just the ones you're seeing on the screen are just a smattering of those. But impressive, to say the least, on the
Certainly is. Coming from a person that cannot swim.
There you go. So I know
Very
you're
impressive.
impressed watching these. We did another podcast. This time we talked to Susan Phelps. Susan's been with us before on this podcast and others, but she's our chief neuroeducation officer. And she and I had a conversation about really just an update on where we're at with our GAIN framework. If you're a listener to this podcast, that's nothing new to you, but really it's constantly evolving and developing. And I know they keep saying pride point for you, but that's something that I know you take a lot of pride in because of the work involved.
Certainly do, and it's been recognized nationally. And frankly, or if you want to put it succinctly, it is aligning everything that we do with how the brain develops and how the brain functions. You would think that would be common in education, but unfortunately, it isn't. So, certainly, leaders in the nation. Susan's certainly an expert, and working with her teachers, working with her schools, we're providing better educational outcomes for our students.
Yeah, it really is exciting. In fact, next week we're going to talk to two people on Susan's team and post that about what it really looks like at the school level as well, all the way down to elementary school.
Right.
So more to come on that topic.
And we're just in the initial stages of rolling
Absolutely.
it out district-wide.
Yes, absolutely. And then finally, we shared a post from one of our elementary schools, Daniel Wirtz Elementary on the far west side. But our teachers, if you're not familiar with these, they meet in PLCs, and that stands for Professional Learning Communities. And what that really means is teachers are coming together. They're very intentional in their work to really plan together, to talk about student work together, to talk about how students are performing and what changes can be made so that they can be more effective as educators. They're realizing that you can't just do this work alone, that team effort is better. And we shared these pictures, and I think it really captures the spirit of what these meetings look like in all of our schools.
You know, I couldn't agree more. And maybe it's just a little bit of semantics, but you can do this work alone.
Can you do it as effectively?
Thank you.
Alone? Okay.
So I use the analogy of education and healthcare all the time. And just think about when you're in the hospital, don't you want your physicians to coordinate their care? Don't
Most
you want
definitely.
nurses to coordinate your care?
You want a true health team.
Absolutely. You want that health team. You want also an educational team for your students. And that's what PLCs, when done effectively, can provide for your students. So
Yeah.
hats off to your teachers. They always want to do the very best job that they possibly can for each and every one of our students. Coming together in that collegial environment in PLCs affords us the opportunity to do just that.
And I think that's what's great about lifting things like this here where we're talking about it now, because if you're outside of the school setting, you may not realize that type of work is
Right.
going on for the betterment of your children and your students that are in school. So definitely agree. Great job to them
Well said.
for that. So that took us out of good news and then into consent items. So if you want to take it from there, Dr. Smith.
Certainly will. So let's jump down to item 3.02, consideration of the allowance of payments. For this 2-week period of time, it was $14.1 million. Those of you that are frequent viewers of the podcast know that that's a little bit higher than what we typically see in a 2-week period of time. However, this still is what I would say the run out of the end of the year expenses that we have. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.4 million of this $14.1 million were invoices, which is typically, or not typically, but which is higher than we typically will see. Item 3.03, consideration to approve grant proposals. So there were 2 grants under consideration, one from Jackie Barnett for the Afghan Refugee School Impact Support to Schools. We do have one Afghan refugee in a school, and then we have been awarded $3,194 to assist with that student's education. And then Wendy McNamara, who is the director of our early college high school, is writing a grant to the Department of Education for us to receive funds to pay for AP or concurrent classes that our students at early college take at Ivy Tech. So that is a win for our students.
Yeah,
also
that's a
win
program
for
we've
parents,
lifted.
right?
Yeah, that's a program we've lifted anytime we talk about our innovative models. But that is a program where you really are, as you've said many times, at times we have seniors that are walking with graduation who've already earned an associate's degree in college.
Right. And early college is a great example of that. I recently read a report of a student that went to our Medical Professions Academy that graduated with 38 college credits.
Wow.
As a parent,
That's a lot.
I appreciate that
Yeah.
because that would have saved me probably a year and a half of tuition.
Yes.
So I think that is remarkable, and for all the opportunities that our students have. Moving on then to item 3.04, consideration to request the carryover of 2022 encumbered but unexpended appropriations. So basically what we were doing is we asked the board last night to carry over the appropriations, which once again is the authority to spend money, provided you have the cash to back that up. So we had this appropriation level in 2022. We did not spend the funds because perhaps there was a project that was ongoing or the work had not been completed. So we're carrying over the authority to spend that money, those funds from 2022 into 2023, and then making certain then that that doesn't use the appropriation level up that we have allocated for 2023.
Really, just another example of the checks and balances in place. I mean, we have the funds, but you still need to have that formal permission to spend those funds.
Absolutely. And then item 3.05, somewhat a parallel path, consideration to approve the resolution to transfer of appropriations within the 2023 budget. So if you think of this basically as your home budget, you have a checking account, you have a savings account. This allows us to transfer money within the checking account to cover expenses that perhaps we had not anticipated or that were higher than we had anticipated. It doesn't allow us to transfer money from one fund to the other, but basically to transfer funds from one appropriation level within a budget to that same appropriation or to that same budget. So then we have to raise appropriation levels to cover expenditures that we had, but then we have to lower the expenditures for unspent funds. Hopefully that's clear.
Well, again, it just shows the specific process that is in place. You're not just doing any of this on a whim. I mean, there is a set protocol to follow for all
Yep.
of this.
So maybe succinctly put, if you have money budgeted for gasoline and you spent more for gasoline than you typically would in a year, and then you have a budget for entertainment, well, maybe you didn't spend as much for entertainment because you took some of that money already to spend for gasoline. So you would just move that appropriation, that authority to spend within your checking account. You're not getting any more money. You're just using it in a different way.
I always appreciate, Dr. Smith, when you make those analogies with your home budget, because we do know, yes, you hear people saying it's probably true. School finance can be somewhat complicated because there is so much to it. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of comparisons if you take it down to that base level between your home budget and our school budget and the things we have to do.
That's right. Appreciate that. Item 3.06, consideration to approve the professional services consultant agreement. So Pam Myers, who was just a stalwart of an employee for us
Very
for
knowledgeable.
many decades in payroll, she recently retired. We'd like for her to come back on somewhat of a part-time basis, really as a consultant to help get us through some of those critically important times in payroll. So we're grateful that she agreed to do that, as well as the board approved that last night. Then item 3.07, consideration to approve the agreement with Old National Events Plaza. You know, we started out in 2013 with the Festival of Nations, which really is there to celebrate our ESL students.
It is a celebration, indeed.
That has grown so much over the years that last year we outgrew Bosse High School. It was in the Old National Events Plaza last year. So this is basically an agreement with Old National Events Plaza for the Festival of Nations. The good news is that this is completely funded through donations. So we are appreciative of the public for investing in our students and knowing the value and importance of this program.
What a wonderful problem to have when you have to find a larger venue to house a program because of its popularity.
And I would encourage anyone and everyone to attend. I was blessed to attend last year, and just an eye-opener.
A lot of pride for
Yes.
all of those students and their families celebrating their cultures really is amazing.
Yes, and how we integrate into our great country.
And I think that takes us through consent and consideration of personnel items.
So as I say, all of those are listed. Encourage you to click on that, open up the document, and peruse that at your leisure.
Okay, and then one item under action last night.
Yes, so this was 5.01, consideration to award the contract for the Highland Elementary School upper level flooring. So this will complete brand new flooring in all of Highland Elementary School. And that contract was awarded to Razor Floor Covering for $220,935.
And as we've said before, if you haven't seen new flooring in your child's school, hang in there because our facilities office is really making their way through our schools to do that really nice upgrade.
Right. It is coming to a school near you.
Yes. And then that takes us to information items, and that brings in today's special guest. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Carl Underwood. Dr. Underwood, you are the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Human Resources. How are you today, sir?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
Well, we brought you in, Carl, because last night you talked to the board. You went through several items here, and then we're going to end even with a slide deck to take people through. So, if you want to just start with item 6.01, usually Dr. Smith will hit on these, but since you're here, if you want to just give us a brief summary of what each one of those were, and then we'll spend some time when we get down to 6.07.
Sure, be glad to. So 6.01, the Education and Operations Fund Monthly Review. These are the monthly reports that are brought to the board for review. And this one just lists really our expenses and for our education and operations funds compared to the same time period from the year before in the same month period. So we're looking at those, looking at any variances percentage-wise, just to see where we stand in our cash balance in both of those funds as well.
And if we could, it's really important to not overspend on a percentage basis. While our budgets change from year to year, the percent of spend that we have within a given month really should be pretty stable, around 8-9%.
Between 8 and 9%, and it's pretty consistent. So we're looking for any variances that would alert us to anything.
Yeah.
And really, as you all go through this, I mean, this is almost a daily monitoring, right? I mean,
It really
we're
is.
spending so much time on each. We talk about these every time we do a board recap podcast.
Yes, we do.
But I mean, you and your team, you are spending a great amount of time just constantly monitoring the financial
Constantly
picture.
monitoring those and looking at cash balances.
Okay. 6.02 then.
So that's the summary of cash balances. Again, that is the balances of the major funds that we present to the board, and just looking at those and again comparing those to the prior month or even the prior year just to see where we stand.
Okay. And then 6.03.
6.03 is our expenditure ledger, and this is a detailed report that lists all of the expenditures within the education and operations funds by function. And so if we want to look at specific detail, we can look at those by account number and location as well.
Would it be accurate to say those are almost looking at all of our transactions?
It looks at a lot of our transactions within those two major funds. That's where the majority of our expenses are.
Okay. And then we'll just keep moving through.
So we then have our 2-year revenue comparison. And again, we're looking at revenue within the education and the operations fund for the same time period from the year before. So again, trying to compare, what kind of revenue did we bring in this time period last year?
Again, obviously, revenue, money coming in to the school.
Revenues coming in, yes.
Okay. And then that takes us to the 2-year expenditure.
And this would be money's going
No,
out.
this is money's
I'm
going
not
out.
a business official, but I did know that. Okay.
So looking at the expenses from the prior year in the same time period, just to see, are we on pace with our expenses from the year before, looking for any variances there that might raise any concern.
Okay. And then 6.06 gets into self-insurance. And explain that to us again. We've covered that frequently. Feel free to jump in, Dr. Smith. But when we talk about the EVSC and 3,400 employees, those that are insurance eligible, we are a self-insured corporation. What does that mean?
Yeah, so this is a report that we bring to the Board of Trustees quarterly for our self-insurance. And we are a self-insured organization for our health insurance. So we are paying the bills for all of our employees for the cost basis for their health insurance. And so since we are paying those dollars, we want to make sure that we have, enough revenue in our account to make those payments. And we're wanting to track to see, are we spending more this year than we did last year? And that's how we make decisions based upon working with our advisors on what our health plan looks like and if we need to make any changes to that plan.
And so for anyone who's confused with that as well, we work with, in our case, Anthem.
Yes.
So I know it might be common for someone to say, Anthem's the insurance company, they're paying the bills, which you said they're not. We are as a self-insured company. So what is the role of Anthem?
I appreciate you asking that question because it is confusing.
Yeah, and I
So
hear that a lot from people.
we basically go out on the market at least once every 3 years, receive quotes, bids in for that particular service. So we use Anthem as the provider. We use their book of business. If you've recently gone to your doctor, had a medical procedure, whatever, there is a bill that is charged, but then there is also the discount that the health insurance provider has negotiated with your health insurance
Sometimes it's
provider.
listed as an adjustment on
Right.
balance.
And then there would be the amount that you would be due. So basically, if there is a procedure that costs $2,000 and then the discounted rate is $1,200 and your copay then would be $40, we, EVSC, pays the $1,200 minus the $40, so we would pay $1,160
Okay.
of that amount. The insurer or employee then would pay the $40. But I think, to your point, people think that in a fully insured program, and it is the case, Anthem would pay that bill, and then they pay that bill through the premiums they collect. Well, in a self-insured model or partially self-insured model, we pay the bills, and we pay the bills from the premiums that we get from the employees. As
well as money from our budget that is
the
dedicated.
employees that we get from the employees really result in about 10% of the total cost that we have for paying for the medical bills of our employees.
And then beyond that, we fill that account with money that we dedicate from our budget because we're dedicating part of it to cover health benefits.
That's
in that
right.
example.
Now, the other part that I didn't mention is Anthem also acts as the third party. They are the ones that actually they submit the bills to us, and then they pay the providers, but we pay that to Anthem.
And again, at the end of the day, and I know, in fact, one of the trustees asked about this last night. That is something I know both of you spend a lot of time frequently analyzing to make sure that that is still in our best interest to remain self-insured. And from everything recently, all the data is telling us that is definitely the case.
It is. Trustee Duckworth raised the question last night. The thing we look at for the quarterly report, really, that I look at, one, the expenses, but mainly the cash balance. Where do we sit in our self-insurance fund? And I believe he had raised the question, is this still a good practice to be in? And it is. We had gone through some lean times in the last couple of years, but we have rebounded nicely with a cash balance that I think is right where it needs to be.
Okay. And then that wraps up 6.06, takes us to 6.07. We're going to put this slide deck up on the screen for anyone who's interested in this, Dr. Underwood. And if you want to just give us a summary of what you shared with the board last night.
Sure. So this is a presentation that we make to the board each year about this time of year. Just really, it's a look at our finances from the prior year. I gave a mention to Courtney Bolivar, our Executive Director of Business Affairs. She and her team put an awful lot of work into making sure that we have this $250 million organization financially in the right spot. So appreciate all the work that she does each and every day. This first slide really was a look at our revenue, and this is our local property tax revenue. The majority of our state revenue and our education fund comes from the state for student tuition. This is a look at the money that we collect in our property tax funds, our operations fund, and highlighted to the board that in the column to the right, we don't collect all of the money that the Department of Local Government Finance approves us for, and we know that
why?
Each and every year.
There's the answer. Tell us why.
And the why is due to property tax caps.
And what are those?
Those are monies that taxing entities don't receive because there is a property tax cap that each individual or entity or corporation pays in the state of Indiana. And any budgets that are approved over that property tax cap, those taxing entities, those taxing units, don't receive those monies. And we know going in to this year that we weren't going to receive $9 million. And there you go. Just over $9 million was not collected.
And I know you always want to make clear, Dr. Smith, I've heard you do this a few times recently. So when you see that percentage, we're not trying to say people aren't paying property taxes.
Right.
That shortfall is due to that property tax cap, Dr. Underwood.
Correct.
Discussed.
In fact, collections probably would result in about 99% if there were not property tax caps.
Okay, interesting. All right, we'll keep moving through this.
So this is a look at our education fund. And again, we look at revenues and expenses, highlighting for the board that our budget in 2022 is $148 million. And if you look at the revenue, we collected $168 million. Well, knowing that in 2019, when we moved away from the general fund to the new education and operations fund,
which was a state law,
that impacted districts across the state.
Correct.
All school districts, public school districts. $30 million of those expenses for the EVSC went from the general fund into the operations fund. And so revenue that went to support those expenses needs to be transferred from the education fund to the operations fund to cover those expenses.
And
so the short version is that they required us to transfer expenses out, but yet they did not transfer revenue in. Correct. They expect school corporations to do that.
And they do that quarterly primarily.
Right.
And just for our listeners, what's an example of a expense you'd pay out of the education fund?
It'd be an example for a business office, for human resources, staff person, or someone in the business office. Those would be expenses.
That was in the old general fund that's now in operations.
Correct. We are now in the operations fund.
Because operations in the education fund would be more what? Classroom type?
Teachers.
Yes,
Correct.
teachers. Okay. All right. But we know in a school district as large as ours, there's a lot of expenses you have to have on that operations side because
Absolutely.
a lot of things take place besides just that teacher at the front of the classroom.
Well, we just talked about health insurance and how that is important to our employees. And so there's always a fine line between making certain that we don't pay any more for health insurance than we need to, so that all of those funds then can go into the paychecks of our employees. But also, we want a good level of service for that. Somebody has to administer that. Somebody has to monitor all of that. Somebody has to pay those bills. That would be business and HR. So, yes, we have the expense of the teacher, and everybody sees the teacher, but the teacher has to be supported for the benefits they receive, their payroll they receive, all of those things.
Really, the good analogy I think we've lifted before is you think medical care, you think hospital, you think the doctor and the nurse in the room that the patient's in. Well, we all know there's a lot of people behind the scenes that keeps that hospital operating beyond just the doctor and the nurse.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't remember the last time I went to the hospital and saw a doctor or write anything on a tablet or piece of paper. It's all in electronic medical records. You have to have IT, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
All of those things that support your physicians and nurses.
Okay. All right. We'll keep
Very
moving through this.
So just highlighting that transfer there, illustrating that for the board, and then going through the expenses and the revenues, and then ending with our cash balance of $27.5 million.
Okay.
Debt service fund. The budget here was $12 million. We collected revenue of just under $12 million and paid those out. We had a cash balance of $400,000, and that's basically where we ended the year as well. The rainy day fund. So
talk to us about this because I know this is something we always mention frequently.
Sure. So the rainy day fund, we had a budget of $8.4 million. When we create the budget and present that to the board, usually in August, we are asking for the authority to spend those funds. We are not asking for revenues to support that. That's cash balance that we already have on our rainy day fund. We are allowed to transfer unexpended and unappropriated or unobligated cash balances at the end of the year, and we did that in the end of the year last year. So we have a balance now of just over $9.9 million.
And we really strive to meet what the recommendation is to maintain in a rainy day fund, correct?
We do. So a good cash reserve for a school district is to have in just over 11%, which we do. It's not housed within this rainy day fund. We have the recommended or the amount that we like to have in a combination of our education fund and our rainy day fund.
And I like that, really back to the home budget scenario. I mean, I like the term that was created, not by us, by someone else, rainy day fund, because that's kind of an old school home budgeting term, but it is what it sounds like. I mean, this is money just in the event of something that you would need to spend that on that you hadn't planned, correct?
And just want to reiterate what Dr. Underwood said earlier. We do ask for authority and permission to spend these funds in the event that we would have to.
There's a
But
process.
Fortunately, we haven't had to spend those funds. We don't ask for money in the amount of $9.9 million. We already have those funds. We just ask for permission to spend when it comes time to developing the budget.
Very interesting. But last thing I'll ask about that, we've said that before, though, with a corporation our size, that may sound like a lot of money, and it is $9 million. But that kind of money in a corporation that operates like we do, you could have to spend money like that pretty fast if needed.
Well, if listeners will remember, just a few minutes ago, I indicated that the allowance of payments was $14.1 million for this 2-week period of time. It's about $5 million greater, or $4 to $5 million greater than what we have in the rainy day fund.
That kind of puts it in perspective. So, all right.
And then so this just looks at our education and rainy day fund balance history. And this is where we speak to the board about having a healthy reserve, that 11%, if you will. And I highlighted for the board last night the growth that we've had going back just a couple of years from 18 million all the way to 34 million. And again, just reiterated to the board that that was intentional, knowing that we have a fiscal cliff that we're approaching here in the fall of 2024.
What do you mean fiscal cliff?
Well, we've been using a lot of our federal dollars, our ESSER dollars, to support some of the expenses.
And that came out of COVID.
And education and operations funds, knowing that those dollars are going to expire, or we'll have to use all of those dollars by September of 2024. And then those expenses that were in ESSER are going to be shifted back to both the education and operations funds, knowing that we're going to use some of the cash balance that we've accumulated over the last couple of years to pay those expenses.
So we will continue to analyze the programs and the processes that we put in place with the COVID, with the ESSER funds. For instance, we have social workers in every one of our schools now. We have additional teacher aides. We put in a lot of additional supports. We want to make certain that we do an analysis to make certain that that is actually giving us the bang for the buck. And then because of the savings that we have obtained really through ESSER, what we say is that will give us a longer runway to continue to put in place those things that we have found to be effective, so that in September of 24, when the funding goes away, the great services and programs that we're able to provide don't disappear.
Because those programs and services ultimately have been put in place to help kids.
Absolutely.
So kudos to both of you and all the folks behind the scenes, because I know you've spent and worked tirelessly to kind of project ahead and be intentional about these decisions, because you're right, Dr. Smith, the last thing you would want is to have to just eliminate one of these beneficial programs because you hadn't planned ahead for that runway.
Absolutely. And when we had the stabilization funds back in the 2009, 2010, 2011 period, when those went away, which everyone knew they would, there were many districts that saw that funding cliff and had to cut very, very important programs. Our promise to our employees and to our students and families and communities, we will not do that.
Yeah, I think we all agree. We hope districts everywhere are being just as intentional, because that's not a good situation if a school
Correct.
district runs into that. So we'll keep moving through this then, Dr. Underwood. Oh, and I think that brings us to the end of that slide deck. So anything that you don't think we had a chance to share from that? I mean, that was a lot of great information that you were able to provide to the school board last night.
You know, I appreciate Carl and Courtney's efforts. I think we're in very good shape financially. That is not just an accident. I was speaking with a board member last night, and he still frequently comments on the fact that we were able to build a brand new elementary school and pay for that school with cash. We didn't go out and bond for that facility like nearly everyone else does. And I think that's just through good stewardship of our funds, making certain that we invest in our people first and foremost, but that we are also very wise in what we do, whether it be facilities or whether it be health insurance for our employees. We've only raised premiums for health insurance, I think, one time in 7 years.
Correct. That truly is unheard of.
It is. And I think that just goes to the excellent people that we have that are great stewards of the public's money that they have entrusted with us, so that we can invest that in our students.
Well said. Well, Dr. Underwood, thank you for taking the time to go through this, not only last night. Thanks for sharing this with us today. And really kudos again to you and your entire team, because none of this happens without a lot of work and dedication.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And then we moved to continued business last night, Dr. Smith, and that was short and sweet. I think you recognized President Kiefer for his term as president, and now he's president of the board again.
Yes, he was president of the board in 2022, and then the board elected him president again in 2023. So we had a plaque to commemorate his service for 2022, and he may see that same plaque again in 2023.
As we always say, we're very blessed to have not only President Kiefer, but all these members of the school board. They really are dedicated, and I know you value their leadership and expertise.
We are truly blessed, not only me personally as a superintendent, but in this community, to have the board that we have. They always look out for the best interest of our students.
Most definitely. And that wraps up today's board recap podcast. Thank you, Dr. Smith, once again.
Thank you.